Every day, almost 20% of the world's entire oil supply passes through a narrow stretch of sea between Iran and Oman. This place is called the Strait of Hormuz. At first glance, it looks like just a simple route on the map. But in reality, this is one of the most important lifelines of the global economy. At its narrowest point, the width of the sea is only about 21 miles. But what's even more surprising is that the actual passage for ships is even smaller. It's just 2 lanes, each 2 miles wide, one for each direction. This means that because the passage is so narrow, it's like a highway with only 2 lanes. But what passes through are millions of barrels of oil every day. And because of this, there's one big truth. If something goes wrong in the Strait of Hormuz, it's not just a local issue. The whole world feels it immediately. Even a small disruption, a single incident, a single miscalculation can cause a chain reaction that reaches global markets. In recent years, it has been repeatedly shown how sensitive this area is. There are warships patrolling nearby. Insurance for oil tankers has increased and shipping companies are quietly preparing backup plans. This is not something to take lightly. Because of this, incidents have also happened here, such as the seizure of tankers, damaged ships, and even direct military confrontations. This is one of the few places in the world where a single wrong move could start a much bigger conflict. For now, the Strait of Hormuz is still open. Ships are still passing through, but the possibility that it could be blocked even for just a moment is enough to make the global energy market panic. And that panic doesn't just stay in the stock market, because when the flow of oil is affected, fuel prices will go up. When fuel prices go up, transport costs will also rise. And when transport costs increase, the prices of goods will also go up. In other words, its effects will be felt not just in the Middle East, but from New York to Tokyo. Now, there's a question that experts have been thinking about for a long time. What if ships no longer needed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz? For many decades, there's been an idea that keeps coming up. A massive canal cutting through the mountains of the Musandam Peninsula in Oman. If this could be done, ships could pass straight through without going through this choke point. On paper, it seems like the perfect solution. But as often happens, simple ideas become extremely complicated in reality. To understand the idea of this canal, we first need to look at the geography of the area. The Persian Gulf is home to some of the world's largest oil producers. This includes Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Almost all oil tankers leaving these countries. There is only one exit, the Strait of Hormuz. Every day, about 20 million barrels of oil pass through here. This means that almost 1/5 of the world's total oil consumption depends on a single narrow passage. There are very few places in the world that have this much impact on the global economy. And the problem is, there is almost no alternative to it. There are some countries that have tried to reduce their dependence on it. For example, Saudi Arabia built pipelines that transport oil to the Red Sea, so it doesn't have to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. The United Arab Emirates did the same. They built a pipeline that directly connects to the port of Fujairah, a place outside the strait. But even if you combine these pipelines, their capacity is still small compared to the amount of oil that ships transport every day. In other words, pipelines still can't replace the role of tankers. And because of this, the whole world remains dependent on a single narrow gateway. And for engineers and strategists, this kind of setup is dangerous. Because when all the risk is focused on one place, the possibility of a big problem becomes much greater. And among all the choke points in the world, this is one of the most sensitive. Now let's look at the map again. This is the Musandam Canal. This is the planned bypass. At the northernmost tip of Oman, there's a place called the Musandam Peninsula, a steep and rocky piece of land that juts out into the Strait of Hormuz. It's like a natural fortress made of mountains. But there's an interesting detail. In some parts of this peninsula, surprisingly, the distance between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman isn't that far. In fact, only a few dozen miles of land separate the two seas. And this is where a simple question comes in. What if we just dig up the land and make a canal straight through the middle? If that happens, ships from the Persian Gulf would no longer need to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. They could go straight out to the open ocean. On paper, it looks like the perfect solution. No choke point, no risk, the route is direct. But in the real world, it's not that simple. These are the engineering challenges or the real problems here. The Musandam Peninsula is not a flat desert. It's part of the Hajar Mountains, one of the roughest and steepest terrains in the Middle East. The mountains here are made of limestone and suddenly rise from the coastline. Some of the mountains
Maabot ng higit sa 2,000 meters ang taas. Yan ay higit sa 6,500 feet. Ibig sabihin kung gagawa ka ng kanal dito, hindi ka lang maghuhukay ng buhangin. Pwede kang literal na magtatabas ng buong bundok at hindi maliit na kailangan. Ang mga modern oil tanker, lalo na ang tinatawag na VLCC o Very Large Crude Carrier, ay kabilang sa pinakamalalaking barko na ginawa ng tao para makadaan ng ganitong kalalaking barko.
The canal needs to be extremely deep, extremely wide, and extremely stable. These ships can be hundreds of meters long. This means the construction needed here is massive. Millions of tons of rock need to be blasted, cut, and moved. There are mountains that need to be reshaped or completely removed. And that's not all. The environmental impact of this is definitely huge. The landscape will change, wildlife will be affected, and the natural ecosystem of the area could possibly be destroyed. And when it comes to costs, it could reach hundreds of billions of dollars. To give you an idea, even the expansion of the Panama Canal cost around $5 billion. But the Musandam Canal could be many times more expensive. And remember, that's not even the end of it. The big thing is, engineering is only half of the real challenge. But here's the bigger problem. It's not just engineering. Even if we say we can solve all the technical challenges, there's still an even harder obstacle: politics. The Musandam Peninsula belongs to Oman, and right now the country doesn't really have any official plans to build a canal in that area. Instead, Oman's focus is on tourism and expanding its ports and other infrastructure, not on cutting through mountains for a major shipping route. And if you think about it, Oman isn't the only one who needs to agree to this. For a project of this scale, intense cooperation from different countries is needed. Support from governments in the region is necessary. Investors who will provide huge funding are needed. And above all, long-term security is necessary to ensure that this won't become a target for conflict. Because there's another truth that's uncomfortable to talk about. Even if a canal is built, it won't eliminate the risk. It will just move the problem somewhere else. Instead of depending on the Strait of Hormuz, the world's new dependency will be an artificial canal. And like any canal, it can still be blocked. A tanker running aground, an attack, or even a natural disaster. Any of these could shut down the entire route in just one day. That means you're just replacing one bottleneck with another bottleneck. So what is the future of global trade, and what does it show? Now, if the Musandam Canal is this difficult and risky, why is it still being talked about over and over again? Because it shows something deeper about our world. Global trade depends on geography. A canal in Egypt, a narrow sea between rival countries, a few select shipping routes that quietly but continuously keep the entire world economy running. For many centuries, these natural choke points have dictated where energy, trade, and power flow. And the Musandam Canal is like a dream, an idea that could change the very map of the world, removing one of the most dangerous bottlenecks. But the reality is tough. The mountains are hard to move, and politics are even harder to change. For now, the Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most important and most dangerous energy routes in the world. And as long as the global economy depends on it, the idea of the Musandam Canal will remain alive. Because behind this question, there is a bigger realization. How fragile really is the system that keeps the whole world running? So, okay, let's move on from that topic. And once again, let's replay this video titled, "The Fate of Iran Has Long Been Written in the Bible." Come on, let's all watch together. Is Iran's fate really in the Bible? Yes, you heard that right. Is Iran's fate already determined? In other words, when the prophecies in the Bible are fulfilled, there are still terrifying things that will happen in the coming days, and we can expect that because it is written in the Holy Book itself. There are things written in the Bible about Iran, and that's what we will find out. But before that, I would like to ask for a like, and please subscribe as well. That would be a huge help for us content creators. Thank you very much. And now here we go, back to the video. With all the news coming out about Iran, conflicts, threats, secret alliances, and nuclear issues, many people don't know that the story of Iran has long been written in the Bible itself. From Genesis to the prophecies about the end of the world, Iran appears under its old name, Persia. Let me repeat, modern-day Iran was formerly Persia. It's not just mentioned, the fate of Persia in the last days has also been foretold. In the book of Revelation, a dark war is mentioned, the battle of Gog and Magog, an alliance that will rise against Israel before the end of the world. But before it became an enemy in prophecy, God first used Persia to free his people, rebuild the temple, and fulfill Daniel's visions. So stay until the end of the video because today we will discover the secret role of Iran in God's plan from beginning to end. The beginning of Persia, a map of the nations recorded in Genesis. Let's start with the first part of the Bible. In Genesis, after the Great Flood, humanity was given a new beginning through Noah and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. From these sons, the nations of the world were born. In Genesis chapter 10, we see the first map of nations, a record of peoples and communities. Here we find 2 important names that are the origins of Persia, Magi and Elam. Magi was a son of Japheth. From him came the Medes, a strong people who lived in the high mountains of northern Iran. Because of the harsh climate in the area, their tribes became strong and organized. Meanwhile, Elam was the son of Shem. His descendants, the Elamites, settled in the southwestern part of Iran near the Persian Gulf, a rich land that paved the way for the growth of their civilization. In Genesis chapter 14, the first major war among many nations was recorded. 4 kings from the east, including the leader of Elam, Kedorlaomer, joined forces and attacked Canaan. They plundered the cities, took captives, and among them was Abraham's nephew Lot. But Abraham was undaunted. With 318 trained men, he attacked the enemies in the middle of the night and defeated them. He rescued Lot and the captives, and the eastern kings were put to shame. This victory was a clear message. No nation, no matter how strong, can prevail against people favored by God. After many generations, the descendants of Elam and Magi did not disappear. While different empires rose and fell, these 2 peoples quietly grew stronger. In the north, the Medes continued to grow stronger, skilled in war, their tribes resilient, and adept in leadership. In the south, the Elamites were thriving with rich lands, culture, and weapons, until the time came when they combined their strength to establish a powerful empire, Persia. Although they did not worship the God of Israel at that time, they were not outside of God's plan. According to prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah, God used them as instruments to punish Babylon. It was God's retribution. Babylon will fall into the hands of Babylon. The Babylon that destroyed Jerusalem and burned the temple of God will not escape judgment. God had long ago determined who would destroy this mighty empire. None other than the united people of Iran, the Persians. But the second prophecy is even more surprising. God will not only use Persia as a rod against the wicked, but also as a liberator. The prophet Isaiah declared that there would be a king of Persia, a pagan ruler not yet born, who whom God would use to free the Israelites from captivity and command the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. He was already called by name Cyrus, a prophecy written more than 150 years before he was even born. And these two prophecies were fulfilled exactly at the appointed time, with the rise of Persia from a tribe to an empire. In the 8th century before Christ was born, a leader named Deioces united the tribes of the Medes and Elam. He was the one who built the very first imperial capital of Persia, Ecbatana. His grandson, Cyaxares, strengthened the armed forces, turned them into a war machine, and destroyed the long-feared city of Nineveh, the center of the Assyrian Empire and one of Israel's fiercest enemies. While Persia was growing stronger, the first prophecy was gradually being fulfilled. God is using Persia as an instrument of his justice and plan of redemption. A young captive who saw the future was Daniel. As the prophecy was gradually coming to pass, there was a young Jew in the midst of the darkness of Babylon whom God chose to see what would happen next. When King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon attacked Jerusalem, he destroyed the city and the temple, and thousands of Israelites were taken into captivity. One of them was Daniel, a young man who was taken and brought to the king's court. But despite being in an environment full of luxury and wickedness, Daniel remained faithful. And because of his faith, God gave him a special gift, the ability to see visions that would reveal the future, not only in his time, but throughout the entire history of humanity. While Babylon held power, Daniel saw in his visions the coming of a new kingdom, a kingdom chosen by God for the destiny of his people. This is Persia, the king's dream and the secret prophecy. While Daniel was serving the king, Nebuchadnezzar was troubled because of a recurring dream. He saw a gigantic statue made of different metals, terrifying and powerful. He didn't just want the dream explained, he wanted to know who could tell him the dream without him describing it. No wise man in all of Babylonia could answer, but Daniel, a messenger of God, came before the king and revealed the entire dream. Along with its meaning, "You, O king, are the head of gold," said Daniel, "but a kingdom will come that will replace yours. A kingdom that is inferior, represented by the chest and arms of silver. The silver symbolizes two united powers, two arms in one body, the Medes and the Persians. They are not equal because eventually the arm of Persia will prevail." From the very heart of the empire that destroyed Jerusalem, Daniel declared that Babylon would fall and be replaced by the kingdom chosen by God, Persia. The prophesied king was Cyrus the Great, and soon the prophecy began to be fulfilled. A young king of Persia, Cyrus united the Medes and gave birth to the empire now called the Medo-Persian Empire. Gradually, Cyrus grew stronger, and the time came when he attacked the very center of the enemy, Babylonia. This was not an ordinary battle. One night, King Belshazzar, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, held a lavish feast with 1,000 nobles. And in the middle of the celebration, he ordered that the sacred vessels stolen from the temple in Jerusalem be brought out. There, they used the sacred items to toast to their idols, an unforgivable mistake. In the middle of the feast, an invisible hand appeared and wrote 4 mysterious words on the wall: Mene, Mene, Tekel, Uparshin. The king turned pale with fear. No one understood the meaning, except for Daniel. And when he arrived, he said, "God has numbered your days as king, and this is the end. Your kingdom has been divided and will be given to the Medes and Persians." While these words were being spoken, Cyrus's soldiers were already secretly entering the city. They dried up the Euphrates River and used it as a passage to enter the city. The gates were open. They were not hindered. That night Belshazzar was killed and Babylon finally fell, the return of the Jews. After 70 years of captivity, the unexpected finally happened. A pagan king, Cyrus himself, issued a decree to send the Jews back to Jerusalem, to rebuild the city and the temple of God. A foreign king became the instrument of freedom. And here the prophecy of Isaiah, the vision of Daniel, And God's plan for his people all came true through Persia. But King Cyrus didn't just allow the Jews to return, he himself funded the rebuilding of the temple. He even sent 2 leaders of the Jews back to Jerusalem, Zerubbabel from the line of David and Joshua the high priest. Through them, the foundation of God's house was laid again. Throughout history, there was only one foreign empire that did not destroy but helped Israel, and that was Persia. The giant bear is a dream of power. But to the prophet Daniel, there was still another terrifying vision. From the turbulent sea, 4 different beasts emerged. The second was a gigantic bear, with one side of its body raised and 3 ribs in its mouth. A voice from heaven commanded, "Stand up and devour your share." This bear symbolizes the next empire after Babylon, the combined power of Media and Persia. That's why it's lopsided, because eventually Persia would completely dominate Media. The 3 ribs symbolize their greatest victories in war. Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt, 3 nations that eventually fell into the hands of Persia. And all of this really happened. After conquering Lydia and Babylon, Persia did not stop. Under the leadership of Cyrus's son, Cambyses de Chephawan, they crossed the Sinai Desert and attacked Egypt. They defeated Pharaoh Psamtik III in the Battle of Pelusium, and the nation that once enslaved Israel, Ram, finally fell. 2 horns, 1 empire. Several years passed while Daniel stood on the bank of the Ulai River. He was once again given a very clear and intense vision. He saw a ram. It had 2 horns, but one of the horns was longer and taller even though it grew last. The ram charged toward the west, north, and south. No one could stop it. And there was a voice that explained it. The ram with 2 horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. Once again, Persia appeared, now as a powerful empire with no one to oppose it. The higher horn clearly refers to Persia as the true dominant power between the 2 kingdoms. 2 peoples, 1 empire, but only one truly holds the power. Persia, the goat from the west. The end will come. As the vision continues, suddenly a goat appears from the west, as swift as the wind. It has a large horn in the middle of its forehead and immediately charges at the ram. In an instant, it strikes and knocks it down. This is the prophecy about the next empire, Greece, under the leadership of Alexander the Great, who will swiftly and completely destroy Persia. Daniel did not know at that time who the goat was, but one thing was clear to him: Persia, the greatest empire of that time, would also come to an end. But before the end came, Persia first reached the peak of its power. Its territory stretched from India to Ethiopia. In the time of King Ahasuerus, the throne of the greatest kingdom was located in the city of Susa, in the heart of Elam. This place is now part of southwestern Iran. And in this city, one of the most astonishing stories in the Bible took place. God's regent, a Jewish woman on the throne of Persia. Ahasuerus held a grand celebration that lasted 6 months. After this, he invited all of Susa to a final feast that lasted 7 days. In the midst of wine and pride, he ordered that his queen, Vashti, be shown to everyone to display her beauty. But Vashti refused, and because of the shame he suffered in front of the whole kingdom, the king deposed her. The king's advisors recommended an unusual step: to search for a new queen from among all the maidens in the empire. The most beautiful ones would be brought to the palace, undergo a whole year of preparation, and be presented to the king. One of them was Queen Esther, an orphan Jew who grew up under the care of her cousin Mordecai. When she was chosen, she was given a new name, Esther. No one in the palace knew that she was a Jew. But because of her kindness and charisma, Esther gained the king's favor, and he made her the queen of Persia, a child of Israel, who entered the heart of the most powerful throne in the world. But a threat was approaching. While Esther quietly ruled, there was someone moving behind the throne: Haman, a descendant from Israel's longtime enemies, the Amalekites. And here begins a story of betrayal, faith, and a miracle that will save the entire nation of Israel from within Persia itself. Haman, who has now been elevated to the highest position under the king, made the entire kingdom bow down to him as a sign of respect. But there was one who refused, Mordecai, Esther's cousin. Because of this, Haman was filled with rage, but he was not satisfied with punishing only Mordecai. He devised a plan to wipe out the entire Jewish people. Personal anger turned into a deadly plan of genocide. Haman approached the king and, pretending to be concerned, reported a certain ethnic group that he claimed did not follow the laws of the empire. Using lies, he persuaded the king to approve an order to kill all the Jews. The order was sealed with the king's seal. In less than a year, all the Jews in Persia, women, men, and children, were scheduled to die. Fear spread throughout the Jewish community. Mordecai quickly sent a message to Esther. Their only hope was Esther herself. Esther's dangerous decision. But to intervene, Esther needed to appear before the king without being invited. This was forbidden and could cost her her life. If someone did this, unless the king extended his scepter, they would be put to death. Esther hesitated for a long time, but in the end, she chose to risk her own life. She walked into the throne room, and with God's help, the king looked at her and extended the golden scepter. But Esther did not immediately reveal her feelings. She knew that the right timing was the key, so she invited the king and Haman to a banquet, and afterwards, she invited them again to a second feast. There, in the middle of the second banquet, she revealed the truth. "If we were only to be sold as slaves, I would have remained silent," said Esther. "But there is a decree that will destroy our entire people. My people and I are destined to die." The king stood up furious. "Who has the audacity to do this?" Esther pointed to the man right beside her. This man, Haman. Trembling with fear, Haman knelt down and pleaded, but it was too late. On the very gallows he had built for Mordecai, he himself was hanged. But even though Haman was gone, the original decree still remained. Because in Persia, a law signed by the king could not be revoked. So Esther and Mordecai approached again and proposed a new decree. This time, the king signed the new law. The Jews had the right to defend themselves. The day came that was originally set for their destruction. But instead of death, it became a day of victory. They did not realize that the very foreign empire became the refuge, throne, and shield of God's people. From Susa to Bethlehem, the secret of the Magi. After the miracle in Susa, Persia seemed to gradually fade from the story of the Bible. Centuries passed. New empires ruled. Rome became the center of the world. But Persia's silence did not mean it was gone. In God's plan, hundreds of years passed. In a time of peace, on a peaceful night, a star appeared. In the book of Matthew, there is a scene that everyone knows but rarely fully understands. Wise men from the east came to Jerusalem. Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? Who are these wise men, and why did they travel such a great distance based only on a star? The original word used is Magi from Greek. It refers to expert astronomers and priests from the east. Wise men of high status in Persia. Although the Bible does not directly state where they came from, there is strong evidence that they were from the former territory of the Medo-Persian Empire, the country now known as Iran. The Magi were part of a religious group in Persia who were experts in stars, ancient scriptures, and prophecies. It is highly likely that they read the writings of Daniel, the same Daniel who once lived in the courts of Babylon in Persia. Daniel also prophesied the coming of the Messiah in Daniel chapter 9, using the exact number of weeks from the rebuilding of Jerusalem to the arrival of the Savior. When the Magi saw the star, they knew the prophecy had been fulfilled. 3 gifts, 1 great proclamation. They left their homes and crossed the desert. And finally they arrived in Bethlehem, bringing 3 gifts: gold as recognition of his kingship, frankincense as respect for his divinity, myrrh as a symbol of the sacrifice and death he would face. while the priests in Jerusalem remained silent while Herod was plotting to have the child killed, the wise men from the east were the first to kneel before the true king. This was not an accident. It was a prophecy fulfilled. Persia, which God once used to free his people, is now the very first foreign nation to recognize the Savior. From the beginning to the manger, from the time of Noah in Genesis to the birth of Christ in Bethlehem, Persia was never absent from God's plan. And according to the prophet Ezekiel, the story of Persia or Iran is not yet finished. In the next part, we will discuss the role of Iran in the last days of the world in the war of Gog and Magog, and how this nation, which was once used to bring deliverance, will once again emerge as part of the final battle. One of the most terrifying visions in the Old Testament can be found in Ezekiel 38, the war of Gog and Magog. According to the prophecy, in the last days, a coalition of nations will attack Israel, the nation restored by God. This is what God says, "Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him." And here is the surprising part. One of the first nations mentioned in this alliance is Persia, which is present-day Iran. It's a great irony that the nation which once helped rebuild God's temple will now become an ally of the enemies of his people. Who is part of the alliance of darkness? Gog, a powerful leader from the northern region, who is often associated by scholars with Russia or Eurasia. Cush, formerly part of Nubia, which is now within Sudan. Put, a region in North Africa, possibly referring to Libya. Gomer and Togarmah, regions around Turkey and the Caucasus. They will join forces to form a global military force and attack like a storm, a cloud that will cover the whole land. But according to the scriptures, they will not succeed. Their attack will anger God himself. He will act directly. There will be an earthquake, fire from the sky, confusion in their army. And in the midst of the chaos, God will reveal his greatness. He said, "I will show my greatness and holiness in the sight of many nations, and they will know that I am the Lord." From being a savior, Persia, which was once used by God to free Israel, is now destined to be part of the final war against him. But this does not mean that God has abandoned Persia. Like humanity, the story of Persia is a full arc, from creation to redemption to downfall, and finally to the possibility of restoration. The forgotten prophecy of Elam, after the war of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Bible describes an intense scene. Corpses in the fields, weapons to be burned for 7 years, and one name, Gog, forever linked to God's judgment. And if Persia is part of this alliance, it will not escape punishment either. But this is where an almost forgotten prophecy from Jeremiah comes in. This is the word of God concerning Elam. "I will break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their strength. But in the last days, I will restore the captives of Elam." A prophecy with two sides, first judgment, but afterwards a promise of restoration. Is there still hope for Iran? Even if they become part of the final alliance against Israel, even if they experience fire from heaven, the story of Iran is not yet closed. Because even in the midst of judgment, God does not close the door to mercy. In the last days, according to the Bible, all the nations that remain after the war will go up to Jerusalem every year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts. And perhaps one of these nations is Elam, Persia. Iran is a picture of humanity. From Genesis to Revelation, Persia has always been there, a crossroads in the history of God and mankind. In Genesis, Elam and Magi were born from the lineage of Noah. In the time of Abraham, Elam attacked Sodom. At the fall of Babylon, God used Persia as a redeemer. During the building of the temple, a Persian king provided the funds. And at the birth of the Messiah, wise men from Persia were the first to recognize him. But at the end of time, Persia will reappear, now as part of the war. But even so, the book remains open. The last page has not yet been written. One final question for you. After hearing everything, Do you believe that Iran today is already playing its role in prophecy? In this time when ancient prophecies are quietly but continuously being fulfilled, where do you think we are in the story? Do you see the signs in the news today? Share your answer in the comments section below. And if you want us to continue exploring the connections between current events and biblical prophecies, please like and share this video. This is one way for us to know that you want more content like this. And if you're ready to go deeper, click the video that's on the screen now, The 7 Signs of Daniel to Identify the Antichrist. Because in this time of deception, true understanding is our most powerful weapon. May God bless you.